Good evening. Welcome to your city council meeting. Thanks for coming. This evening, we have two city councilors on Zoom and two Urban Renewal Agency board members on Zoom. So a full house virtually and in person. First thing we're going to do is remember to turn off our cell phones. Then we're going to acknowledge that the land we work on was the land of other people before our people came, and I think it's good to keep that in mind. Let's salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jen, do we have anyone signed up to speak to the council? Given that, we will move directly into the Urban Renewal Agency, suspend the city council meeting for now.
Okay, just a little slower than Mr. Mayor. Where am I here? There we go. This is opening the Urban Renewal Agency meeting of January 8th. And we can just move right in. Is there any business from the audience there? And we have Tim and Ben and Heather online. Hi to all of you guys.
Gladys.
And Gladys.
Oh, and Gladys, of course, Gladys. Okay, consent agendas, first thing up. I'd like to see a motion. There's one set of minutes in there.
I would move we approve the consent agenda.
Second. Any additional discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Chair votes yes as well, so it passes. Regular business items, Will?
Great. Thank you, Chair Zan Miller, members of the Urban Renewal Agency Board. Before you tonight is the first resolution of 2024, resolution number 1, formally adopting the Heights Streetscape plan into the Heights overall Heights Urban Renewal Plan. And what this action is meant to do is formally and explicitly state that all the projects that are in the Heights Streetscape plan are now incorporated and to the Heights plan and eligible for urban renewal funding. Which is meant to create legislative intent and give momentum to the projects. So this project really traces all the way back to 2018 when we started to prioritize what we wanted our first projects in the Heights to be. And it became clear that just doing some small scale improvements to the district wasn't going to be sufficient to the community's vision. There was grassroots activities to look at different ways that the Heights could be constructed, and really a lot of grassroots energy. So we decided to take a pause and do a more comprehensive look at what the built infrastructure of the Heights could be in the roadway. Brought on MIG to do this work, broke it into 3 phases. Started with the Urban Renewal Agency Board stating your values and your intent, creating a public engagement plan. Moved on to a phase 2 where multiple alternatives were generated that met those values and scored against those values. And then led into a large open house, focus groups, online surveys, many methods of public engagement, traffic studies, multiple design review studies. That created the final preferred concept plan that was reviewed by the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee and then by this board in late December. So the final Heights Streetscape plan that you have in your packet today is the same product that you reviewed in December, now with a executive summary, as well as a series of appendices approaching about 800 pages that are online, not printed out in your packet tonight. Supporting all that work. So tonight, it's fairly simple action is to approve the resolution, but while it's a small, simple action, it really is encompassing those 4 years of really hard work and engagement across the community. So that I'll answer any questions.
I think after there's questions, if there's any, I think we should just go around the horn. This is a really, this is a really big deal. It really is. And I hope we have the guts and wherewithal to make it happen, because that's the real proof of the pudding. Any questions from those onliners, since I have my mic on now?
None for me, Mark.
Okay, so we'll just go around the horn and get any thoughts or just where our heads are at before we take a motion to pass this resolution. Ben, why don't you start?
I don't have any questions. I'm good.
Yeah, Tim?
None for me, Mark.
Sweet. Heather?
No questions.
Okie doke. Gladys?
Thank you. I do have a question. I see that in the Heights Streetscape Plan, we received a list of all the potential grants that we were going to be looking at to help us with making this project come to fruition. But what I haven't seen is what specifically is being pursued in those grants to help us achieve in making all of this work happen. So I don't know if we necessarily need to discuss that right now, but that's something that I'd like to just have more clarity moving forward, or if that's something that as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to have more clarity.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that in a small way. The staff report has what the immediate next steps are, which is to pursue jurisdictional transfer in the Heights, and also put this into the transportation system plan. We expect there should be some amount of dollars that comes to us through the jurisdictional transfer. And then also that plus the TSP really are pre-steps that make us competitive for grants. Applying for something that isn't yet in our TSP just isn't super competitive. But we're going to, we are keeping our eye out for Great Streets grants, Safe Rest of School grants, any federal legislation, all of those that once we're ready to apply, we're going to jump on those as quickly as possible, but also understanding this is probably a generational plan that is going to take many, many years. And so it will be a constant pursuit of as many sources of outside funds as possible.
Thank you for that. My other question was just I looked through the plan, and when I look at it through a lens of equity, I don't really see a whole lot around variety of languages. I see a lot of information around different stakeholders and whatnot, but is the idea that it is really broad and then you can get more specific later on or as the plan continues to develop?
Yeah, I'd say the equity components were in the building of the plan through the focus groups, the different languages that were done through phase 2. Most specifically, we're also for the plan itself translating the executive summary into Spanish, and that will be posted online. But absolutely through the further development of each one of these projects, while we have the skeleton of a design here, say this is about 10% designed. Each one of these pieces, as we work through the implementation plan that you see in the packet, will have various levels of additional outreach. For simple projects like doing bump outs and enhanced crosswalks, that's pretty straightforward. But when you get to the roundabout with the placemaking, the area for like kind of open placemaking, or the potential for a plaza street over by Belmont and where 12th and 13th split, that's really a blank canvas that will have a whole lot more engagement and community involvement as we fill in that blank canvas.
Okay, thank you. The last question that I had was page 45 of this packet. It talks about energy conservation, but back to it's really broad. Is that intentional or? You know, I think there's a lot of projects that, for example, our Energy Council has been working on and has had some findings and specific action items moving forward. So when I look at this, it's just, again, it's really broad. It's not very specific, but if that's the intention, so that as we go along, we get more specific, then just no issues or no concerns from me.
I think it's, generic for the, each city, and this language came out of when the district was formed, 15 years ago or whenever that was. So I think it's all reminding ourselves that every decision we make impacts that stuff. So I think it's a good question, but as we do implementation things, asking ourselves these questions that are in the plan is an excellent thing to do. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, as new councils are coming and there will be others that come after us, and we will continue updating and renewing. We have resolutions on this that we are lifelong learners and we're going to continue doing better. And I'm just curious as to, are we updating all of these pieces that we are learning as we're going along to make sure that our policies are more effective, equity focused moving forward?
Chair Zamler, if I can comment on that, I think that is a really great point and really kind of gets to, while this may be a little bit of an overly formal action to formally put the Heights Streetscape Plan into the Heights District Plan, it really does create that continuity of policy where we don't forget that there was a Heights District Plan that was adopted in 2011 and just say the Heights Streetscape Plan is the new thing, because that's what is on top of mind. But taking this moment to revisit, make sure it aligns with and formally adopt and combine the Heights Streetscape Plan into the existing Heights District Plan.
Thank you.
Cool. Doug?
We doing questions only, comments?
Questions, comments, anything pre-resolution?
No, I'll just want to thank everybody for all the hard work. All of the counselors before, all of the agency members before, all the staff before, present as well. This is a great moment. Can't wait for this for Hood River, and I have no questions.
Yeah, I mean, this, the streetscapes plan is what we've been working on for years. It's what the board accepted back in December. So that I'm reading this as just kind of checking the box of attaching it to the plan for future generations. So I'm totally on board.
Nothing to add.
Echo the sentiments of my other counselors.
Suggested motion in page 12.
I move the Urban Renewal Agency Board adopt resolution 2024-URA-01.
Second.
Woohoo, number one. All right, we have a motion from Grant and a second from Megan. Any other discussions before we vote on that? Seeing none, all in favor say yes.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, I vote yes as well. Resolution passes. On we go. Good work.
Okay.
And that's basically it, eh? Well, let's just do a run around the agency board for any comments. Grant?
None.
Paul?
No.
Megan?
Nothing.
Doug?
None.
Gladys?
None for me.
Heather? Tim?
None for me, Mark.
Ben?
Nothing from me.
All right, well, you guys are out of here in short order then. The Urban Renewal Agency meeting is adjourned or closed.
Great. We'll reconvene city council. Still no business from the audience. And we have a presentation from D Inline Hydro, Andrew Benjamin, and our own Mr. Schmidt.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Tonight's presentation on the hydro update. do a quick introduction. I brought a whole team along this evening. Andrew Benjamin, project manager and engineer with Inline Energy is with me. Haley Ellett, analyst or management analyst, is on Zoom, and Chris Longinetti, finance director, is on Zoom as well, for any questions. I'm hopeful with tonight's presentation, clear up any questions, answer any concerns, and get a direction from council with a motion as far as a direction to head on this project. Before going to Andrew's presentation, back in November, Andrew and I took a trip up to Bellevue, did a site visit up there on a hydro project that has been online for about a year. This particular hydro project is very similar to ours in the fact that inlet pressures are relatively the same. The hydro size is a little bit smaller. It's about half the size. It's a 60 kW hydro system. The still has the wicket gate similar to ours that will control the water into the pump. So their inlet pressures are roughly 235 psi. Ours are 300, or ours is 300. The operator allowed us to do go into full motion up there, do a controlled startup, controlled shutdown, and then we also did basically an e-stop, which simulated complete loss of power, which was one of our biggest concerns. Their system has no pressure mitigation whatsoever. The upstream pressure spiked roughly 30 psi at full power loss. I think the pressure fluctuated for roughly 5 minutes is what we saw as it just gradually slowed down and leveled itself out. So site visit was, I would say, very beneficial as far as from an operator standpoint, and just being a little more comfortable in how the hydro reacts to the loss of power, which was our biggest concern with the upstream pressure and mitigating that pressure. So yeah, good trip. Very thankful for the folks up there with Bellevue and allowed us. We spent, I think, 4 hours messing with the system and just a very impressive system. It's a huge underground vault. Everything's underground. But yeah, really beneficial from an operator standpoint. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to Andrew. Fun fact about Andrew, he in our drive up to Seattle, we had plenty of time to talk. Andrew owns his own hydro just recently. He owns his own hydro facility up in Packwood, Washington. It's what 200 or 20 CFS, quite a bit larger than what ours is. And he is so roughly 500 kW. We're looking at 120 kW. So pretty big facility. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Andrew. Yeah. Oh, I think this is PowerPoint right there. Where do you see it right here? Good. Awesome.
Great to see you all, council. My name is Andrew Benjamin, civil engineer and project manager with Inline Energy. Purpose of the presentation is just to give you guys a project update on what's been done so far, touch on the surge analysis, and that was a major talking point last time, and talk about next steps.
So if you look closely, you got a sharp eye, you might see someone you recognize in the middle on the top photo. That is those two are photos of our site visit at the city of Bellevue. You can see that's the 6-inch Canyon inline turbine. The one we're planning on using is an 8-inch, so it'd be slightly larger than the one that's shown in this picture. Just for context with regards to sizing. So as far as the agenda, just going to go over some overview features about the site, get everyone reacquainted with it at D Bridge, and then discuss the project status, go over the surge analysis, the cost estimates, financial summaries, and next steps. So as most of you all know, the existing D Bridge PRV is in a vault located at the intersection of Punch Bowl Falls Road and Lost Lake Road. It's along the D Highway up near a couple miles from Punch Bowl Falls. This is a photo of the vault, which consists of 2 10-inch pressure reduction valves, as well as 1 2-inch pressure reduction valve. The idea is to implement a hydroelectric power plant in parallel to this existing vault to capture the wasted pressure going across the valves that you're seeing here. As far as project status and work that's been done thus far, we were able to attain an easement to position the building on private property just north of the existing D Bridge vault. The 50% civil, mechanical, electrical design, and technical specifications were completed. We were able to apply and secure around $1 million in grant funding from both the Energy Trust of Oregon, as well as the Oregon Department of Energy under their CREP program grant. The surge analysis was completed. We hired a group named Flow Sciences out of San Diego. They work nationally on larger and metropolitan water district systems, and that's all they do is surge analysis studies. We've worked with them on 6 of our 13 projects in the past, and they stamped their recommendations, and we've had a great experience working with them. Each hydro project, or most hydro projects, are required to receive federal approval with regards to permitting. We went through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission under the qualifying conduit notice of intent process, and we attained the permits for this project. The Oregon Water Resources Department, we went through a laborious process of attaining the hydropower beneficial use water right permit. That was attained as well. County land use permit, we received approval. Next step is that the 90% design plans were required to submit them to the Oregon Health Authority because it's a potable water system, so they'll want to review. And lastly, we submitted the interconnection application in summer of 2023. And Pacific Power, we've had 2 conference calls with them since then. They've reviewed, they've indicated to us that they don't anticipate any upgrades to the distribution or transmission lines on this project. Their engineers were involved on those phone calls as well. We've been badgering them nonstop since we've had discussions with them. They can be quite hard to get a hold of. Next steps on that are getting the, which they've indicated to us, are them drafting an interconnection agreement, a power purchase agreement, and any cost estimates associated with intertime. So we are expecting that coming up in winter of this year. So put a couple technical slides together, which normally we don't do in these types of meetings, but I think it's important to touch on with regards to the safety of the city's water system and the surge analysis that we performed. So when on these hydropower systems, when there's a power loss condition, there's a what occurs is the turbine and generator lose their resistive torque from the electrical grid. So what that forces the equipment to do is rotate at an overspeed condition. We're required to protect the equipment and prevent it from running at overspeed for typically no longer than a duration of about 5 minutes or so. Well, in that instant, and you'll see in the next graph, about half to a quarter second when we lose power, and the turbine begins rotating faster, it actually physically pushes water back upstream and causes a pressure surge in the pipeline. So there are, on all of our projects, we've designed them all with surge mitigation. We never designed one without it. So what we had Flow Sciences do was look at the worst possible case scenario of a surge condition. So that's where we're running maximum flow, where the city has high demands and we lose power up at D. What is the worst condition we're going to see that as far as a pressure surge on the pipeline? So the 4 scenarios you're looking at are what we call our option 0, the as-is scenario. So if we just installed the hydroelectric station in parallel to the existing vault, and there was no surge mitigation in place designed, what would occur in the water system? Our option 1 and option 2, which are listed as 2 and 3 there, but it's a little, bear with me. We had an option 0 as being our as is. So our option 1 and option 2 are implementing a 4-inch surge relief valve. And to take that a step further, a 4-inch surge relief valve with an 80-gallon pressure tank. And we wanted to see what the hydraulic models would look like that Flow Science ran in their calculations based on these scenarios. And our last option, our option 3, is really our overkill scenario, a surge relief valve and a 500-gallon pressure tank if we just wanted ultimate safety on the water system. The highlight is all 4 of these conditions passed the surge analysis test. Okay, so this slide, bear with me on this. The x-axis here is, well, before I even say that, there were probably 15 different sets of graphs, in-depth ordinary differential equation calculations, and processes that went into the surge analysis. I think this graph captures it in as small of a snippet as we can given the time frame. So our x-axis here is the time following a loss of power condition in seconds, and it goes all the way up to 6 seconds. Our y-axis is our pressure head in terms of feet. Pressure can be classified in either PSI or feet. We've just converted it in this instance. What I want you to focus on first is the blue dotted line. So the blue dotted line is the current pipe operating pressure, which is 300 PSI. And that's per the design specification, per the manufacturer under AWWA standards for ductile iron pipe. This red dotted line is the maximum allowable surge pipe pressure. So there's typically a tolerance of 1.33 of the pipe class pressure, and that's our allowable surge. So that's 400 PSI, and sorry to go back and forth on units on you, but that puts us at right around 840 feet. And we actually, it's a little bit larger than that, but we subtracted 10% for pipeline degradation over time to be even more conservative. And that's what you're seeing with this dotted line up here. For context, for a pressure burst to occur, the pipeline manufacturer, per their equations, correlates 3,200 feet of pipe pressure. So to put that in perspective on this axis, we're not even shown. It's 3 to 4 times what's shown on this axis for us to have a catastrophic burst in the pipeline. So the next figure I'd like you to take or graph I'd like you to take a look at is this red one right here. This red is our option 0, our do nothing scenario, and just not designing any surge mitigation. You can see here within the first half a second, when that turbine rejects flow back upstream, there's a raise in pipe pressure up from what was right around 675 feet, going now to about 820-ish feet, which is still below the maximum allowable surge pipe pressure allowance. The green and the blue are options 1 and 2. The green considers just a 4-inch surge relief valve. The blue considers a 4-inch surge relief valve as well as an 80-gallon pressure tank to mitigate surge. And what you're seeing here is the peak with the blue and the green compared to the red are much lower. And that's because the valve is doing its job and mitigating some of the surge. And you could see that over the course of these 6 seconds, we kind of level back out to what was the operating pressure. Our purple is the overkill here. That's with the 500-gallon tank and the 4-inch relief valve. You could see the spike in surge takes much longer to occur, and it's still lower than our previous alternatives, and then it levels out over some time. I know I've thrown a bunch of information at everyone. I'll pause here. I think it's a good time for any questions, comments, etc. Go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. What's SRV pressure setting?
Surge, so that's a great question. That's the surge relief valve pressure setting. Typically, if we're operating at 300 PSI, what we'll set, and it's a mechanical adjustment on a surge relief valve, we'll set that to, and this can be worked through with Adam. It's typically set at 10% above the standard operating pressure. So that would be 330 PSI, which is what you're seeing at 748 feet right there, if you convert.
And so that's the setting, sorry, I'm talking to this, that's the setting of like that valve opens when you hit that point?
That's correct. So as your pressure is rising here in the first quarter second, this valve, the surge relief valve, won't open until it sees that pressure of about 748 feet, and then it'll mechanically open on its own. There's no power sent to that valve.
Okay. And then in the red line, the option 0, where it seems to settle out, higher than the next two options. Why is that, or what does that mean?
So another great question. For the sake of time, I didn't include more plots in this, but there's other plots that go over the course of 2 to 10 minutes. And that red line eventually lowers over the course of those 2 to 10 minutes. But for the first immediate 6 seconds, which are the highest risk of when a pressure wave can occur in the pipeline, this is the results that we're seeing.
Awesome. Okay. And then just like big picture level, and I know you said it, but I want to make it clear to myself as well. But so even if we put in surge protection, and even if all of that failed, this is showing that it would still operate safely and not, explode the water line.
That's another great question. So in the event that, let's say, our surge relief valve failed and our 80-gallon pressure tank, for whatever reason, did not activate, yes, your assessment is correct. The maximum pressure would still be less than the maximum allowable surge pressure of the rated of the pipeline.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I think it's really interesting, the missing piece of information that we had here in previous assessment of the previous city project manager was a surge pressure. In his estimation before, it would be 300 PSI was kind of the top versus surge pressure. So can you explain a little bit just about surge pressure, since it's kind of a new concept for some of us up here, I think?
There's so many different ways we can go on this, but well, pipes are typically rated based on their pressure class. So the thicker the pipe, the higher its pressure class rating is, and the more pressure it can stand. So there's what's called operating pressures, surge allowance pressures, testing pressures, and burst pressures. So typically with ductile iron pipe, the manufacturers will design them like 300 PSI is usually about almost a ½ inch thick pipe. They'll design them to operate consistently at whatever working pressure they'll call it. And that's what they call their working class pressure. In this case, it's 300 PSI. The surge allowance pressure on ductile iron is typically conservatively take the pressure class rating, multiply it by usually 1.33. And that gets us our surge allowance. So you're allowed to run at that for a limited amount of time. It's not designed to operate at, let's say, 400 PSI for extended periods of time. And then aside from that, there's testing pressures. Most 300 PSI pipe is tested at 500 PSI in the factory for a duration of time. And then there's burst pressure. And for context, the burst pressure on this I mentioned was 3,200 feet. The conversion to that is about 1,400 PSI.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Does that help answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Slightly on that, that's industry standard and like general. Like everyone meets that standard in order to sell pipe.
That's
kind of thing.
AWWA standard for ductile iron pipe,
Okay.
which
Like-
is industry standard. Sorry.
I am guessing that your recommendation is the blue line, but so far, the slides in the presentation just throw 4 options up there and don't say, here's the one we would suggest and why.
So another great question. Our recommendation. So the blue and the green were both acceptable to us based on our engineer's recommendation and Flow Sciences. I really think the purple option is just overkill as far as, I mean, a 500-gallon tank is 300 PSI rated is quite heavy to maneuver and work on.
You guys took all my questions, so. Yeah, Tim.
Tim?
Yeah, Mark actually asked my question, but given that 1 and 2 are acceptable, would option 2 provide an extra level of added security?
Sure. I mean, the data shows that our surge, a maximum surge pressure drops by about 30 feet, 25, 30-ish feet if we go with option 2 compared to option 1. And an 80-gallon tank, just as far as cost benefit, I think they're pretty reasonable to work with and procure for the project. So yeah, we'd be comfortable with either.
Thank you.
I gotta say, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about that movie Jurassic Park, where the scientists tell us all the reasons nothing can ever go wrong, and I know nothing about pipes and surge. And one thought I had is I could imagine an event that would cause a power outage in D for like a matter of days. After 6 seconds, like, is this stable for a really long time, or?
Another good question. So the way this system is designed to operate is if there is a power outage, there is DC backup power on site that will allow our valves, and actually electrohydraulically open and spring close shut inlet valve that will allow us to isolate the turbine system. The idea is, depends on the agency, but we typically like someone to actually go back out there and restart the system if there's an issue for safety purposes. So the system will isolate itself. There'll be a pressure difference downstream, which will then result in the existing clay valve operating like it currently does.
Just for language, clay valve is
Oh,
not
sorry.
something we're familiar with.
Pressure reduction valve, I'm sorry. The existing pressure reduction valve will operate as it currently is.
Other questions for this? Yeah, Grant.
Options, none of the options have cost estimates associated with them that I could find in the literature. Is there, how much is the difference between option 0 and 1 and 2?
So we included in our cost estimate, option 1, a 4-inch surge relief valve.
On the next slide.
The budget.
It should be in there. These are hard to see. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to suss out.
So it's in the piping, valves, and fittings. A surge relief valve is included in there, a 4-inch surge relief. We did not include an 80-gallon pressure tank, but those, I mean, relatively are not expensive. 500-gallon tank could be expensive, and that would also increase the size of the building. An 80-gallon tank, I think that could probably be just captured in the contingency.
Yeah, familiar with the size of solar too. Yeah, I was just curious if those costs were captured or not. Thanks.
Yep.
Others? Carry on.
Okay. Going on to our cost estimate, the original cost estimate several years ago was around 1.2, 1.3 million. Our cost estimate now is right around 1.9 million. And there's several reasons for that. One of them is there was a request for a building design change. We originally had a prefabricated building and budget for around 60,000 for it. There's a request for a CMU building that drove project costs up by about 200 to 250,000. We were all around for the COVID-19 pandemic and saw what inflation prices did to materials and labor. So that was another reason for project cost increases. And we got these, we even solicited a soft bid from a reputable contractor in the area. And that's kind of what we put in here based on what we're looking at. We discussed some of the additional surge mitigations, and then there was fencing and site security that was requested as well, which was not part of the original design.
I don't know if this is for Andrew or for Adam, but can you talk about why the building was requested to be changed, or what benefits that's bringing for quite a substantial cost change?
Well, we're still open. We're open to any option as far as building design. We've designed CMU buildings, and that's what we included in this 50% design. I think the sentiment or thought back then was there was maybe more site security provided with them, longer lasting potentially. It wasn't our decision. That's what else.
I guess maybe I'm asking Adam, can you address this?
Yeah, I think some of this was visual aesthetics as well, with moving the site over to the current location that it's at on Prim's property as well. So that was some of the concern, along with the fencing with the security fencing around the building. There was a significant cost with that as well. And I think this kind of goes back to the previous discussions that we were having with the previous project manager.
I guess I had a similar question related, but if you see opportunities to save $100,000, we can save $100,000. That'd be good, right? That's for the next project. When I looked at the site map, I had sort of a PTSD moment thinking about the Northwest Natural Valve right next to the road, sort of like this one. And hopefully bollards are part of what you consider site security. That would be good to, especially icy road, D highway.
Yeah, the location of this is tucked back kind of up in.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
The little arrow is like right next to the road.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'll just sneak my last question in here, which is the generator itself has about 20% of the cost lines on there. And if you have 500 kilowatts in your basement, is it something where we can adjust? Can we go up a model? I mean, is it the same house, the same? Is everything the same to get more bang for the buck, or is this size based on the water pressure and stuff that we have?
It's size based on the hydraulics in the design. So we took a comprehensive look at multiple years of flow data as well as pressure data. We didn't design it to capture the maximum flows because turbines typically have a flow range that they can operate within. We designed it to capture the most probable and most profitable flows. So with rotating machinery, it's a plus to keep it online 24/7, 365. Obviously, you're going to have planned outages and maintenance, but we never design our systems to only run for, let's say, 8 or 10 hours a day and then shut, or only capture peak flows. So based on the site hydraulics here, the size of the turbine and generator that you're seeing have been spec'd out and designed. We actually looked at 5 or 6 different turbines before we settled on this one.
So it's in the happy place for the whole system.
That's correct.
Thank you, Gladys.
Thank you. I want to start off with, I am not a water expert at all. So this is completely out of my wheelhouse. So it sounds like you've all been planning for what this is going to look like for the next 30 to 50 years. You were all just talking about additional costs for the house that this would live in. what is the contingency plan for any other challenges that come up that could make the cost of the project go up? What would those risks be, and what is the plan, or how is staff planning to mitigate these financial or any sort of operational risks associated with the project moving forward?
Good question. So we did reach out to like I mentioned, the general contractor in the area, and they put together a soft bid estimate on this project. And we also included a 10% construction contingency at this stage. As far as, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. And let's say that in 2 to 3 years, I mean, potential inflation, is that something obviously that would make the price go up? Do we have any sort of guesstimates of, the longer this project takes, I'm certain that the costs may go up. Do we know by, or expect by how much?
It certainly could, but you'll see in the next slide, we have a project schedule, and we're anticipated, if all goes smoothly here, to commission this by the summer of 2025.
Thank you. I do see the grants, the 3 grants that you're all looking at. My question was, do you foresee any other expenses that may require any additional grants that are not listed on here?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't understand your question. Do we anticipate other expenses with grants? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, do you anticipate any additional expenses that may be outside of these 3 grants that you're looking at? So that, for example, the project would cost more than what the grants you have available. And so that's why I had asked what is the plan to mitigate any sort of financial or operational risks moving forward?
We came up with an itemized line by line cost estimate to try to identify the costs at this stage. So, yeah, I'm not sure I really have a great answer for your question, other than that we've tried to do as much diligence upfront now, and we've installed a number of these projects. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what's involved as far as risk. We've attained most of the permits. Interconnection, that's usually a big risk on projects, and this one is almost at the point of getting finalized. Contractor could hit a gas line or something that we didn't anticipate was in the area. There, we can do a pothole survey when we get out for construction, but yeah, we haven't identified any other further risks.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the clarity.
Sure.
Grant? Just follow-up question on your surge analysis. Assuming the cost between option 1 and 2 is actually identical or roughly the same, barring an 80-gallon tank, is there a significant delta in between the safety between option 1 and 2? Is that rate of change a significant concern?
So you're looking at about the difference between a max surge pressure of a difference between about 760 feet versus 780-ish feet.
Yeah,
and that's about 8 PSI.
And the time frame of the surge going up and down, is that any significant concern between those 2 options?
Our engineers would say no.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
This is just a quick slide about the financial summary. We took the project cost estimate, baked it into a financial pro forma with very conservative assumptions on O&M. We even included items in O&M that we don't typically include, including a new PLC at year 8, new batteries at year 8, new pressure transmitters at year 8, new flow meter at year 10, and a generator rewind at year 15. Those are all items that we typically put on the back end a little bit later into the pro forma, but we included them just to be even more conservative on this one. You could see the financial metrics. Capital required for each year, assuming, and you'll see in the schedule, the next slide, assuming we get most of the soft items done in 2024 and we break ground in 2025. And then the grants that we're able to obtain from the Oregon Department of Energy, Energy Trust of Oregon, as well as we modeled a 30% investment tax credit. That can be up to 40% for going with domestic materials, and Canyon Hydropower is located just north of us in Washington. As far as next steps, just finalizing the grant acceptance for both Energy Trust and ODOE grants. Getting our power purchase agreement, interconnection agreement, and cost estimate all finalized with Pacific Power. Once that's done, that's the trigger to be able to pre-purchase the turbine generator. These turbines are custom, so they typically have anywhere between a 40 to a 52-week lead time. The goal is to pre-purchase, have the manufacturer start making the turbine, and then ideally it shows up on the construction site once we have our piping and our foundation in. We hoist the equipment in, and then we build the sidewalls and roof up on top of it.
How much does that generator weigh roughly?
Oh, they vary. On this one, somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 pounds. Yeah, they're not light. And then work through final design by summer, building permits and plans reviews after that. Bid it out in the fall. Award the bid in winter, and then break ground in spring. And commission it in the summer.
Commission means it starts spinning.
Correct. That means our entire team would be out there and run the turbine through its paces, test it, make sure it's operating safely and effectively, and train the operators.
Are we anticipating an additional firm, like we have Jacobs and Windsor for our sewer plant? Will we be hiring somebody, Adam, or?
As far as like project management goes?
No, to operate.
Oh, no, we would be operating it, and then I think we've worked agreements with maybe farmers. We've talked with folks from West Fork Farmers, one of those facilities as well, to help us out when it's rebuild time.
Great, thanks.
Well, in that same vein, because Andrew mentioned part of commissioning was training the operators. So I was wondering if one or both of you can talk a bit about like how extensive that training is, or, you know, Adam, as you've talked with Andrew, are you feeling comfortable that you and your crew will feel confident, you know, taking this over once we're like up to speed and we know it's operating well?
Yeah, so just based on the Bellevue visit and the hands-off experience that they've had up there, very confident that the operators that we do have are more than capable of just day-to-day operations, no problem. I don't know if you want to.
Well, we went to the site visit in Bellevue, and we ran the turbine through its paces. And I think it got Adam a chance to see how we bring these units online. Touchscreen HMI, start button initiates a start sequence. There's an automated PLC that governs the wicket gate position. And it has real-time feedback settings based on the pressures and flows in the system and how much it can process at a given time. It'll operate until it's operating efficiently or based on whatever demands or pressure set point you have in the system. There's an emergency stop button in case we need to hit e-stop, and we would have the remote ability to do that as well. As far as maintenance, we saw oiling the bearings. That was one of them once a year. You know, refreshing the oil in the bearings, checking on the solenoid on the hydraulic power unit, making sure there's no leaks there. Checking your battery voltages, making sure your batteries haven't lost voltage, and inspecting for general leaks. It's more so preventative maintenance and planned maintenance. So typically at year 25, 30 is when you pull the roof or you pull the generator out through the roof hatch. We budgeted it for earlier on this project, but you pull the generator out through the roof hatch and you can send that to a shop to get rewound. Meggers tested, high pot tested, check the insulation and winding resistance on it. It's probably also a good time to inspect the runner, make sure there's no cavitation or any damage to it at that point. And then just general valve maintenance and ensuring you don't have leaky pipes. What did that kind of sum it up, Adam, based on what we saw there?
Yeah.
I don't want to underspeak for what's involved in there, but we had a chance to stress it out pretty good.
Yeah, I would say, very similar to even our the hypochlorite generation system that we have, basically runs itself. We just kind of oversee preventative stuff, so.
Great, thanks. Karen, is that the end?
That's it.
All right. Any more questions for these good people? Thanks for your good work on behalf, because you know, this is our water line, so. Really, huge stakes, regardless of the likelihood or unlikelihood.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you, council.
Abigail?
I was gonna ask Adam if you could stop the presentation, please. Thank you. And if you have additional questions, otherwise you have a motion in your packet for today. I did have, if I could just, one other comment. I think there was a question about the building and why the building might be constructed. And I think is there a noise issue with is the generator loud and is the building designed to contain noise?
Building is designed to contain.
Closer to the microphone. Sorry, I should have asked before you walked away.
I need to go back and look at the exact decibel rating, but we were able to have a conversation in the building. You can hear a light sound from outside the building. I can get back to you with the exact decibel ratings. That would be helpful, but they're not. I mean, they're buildings you can have conversations in.
Great, thank you.
Is the heavier duty building gonna be helpful if a tree falls off?
Most likely.
Because you mentioned tucked up in and I thought, oh, wait. I don't know.
There are trees in the area. I don't know if, yeah, as far, that was the deciding factor though. And that was discussed quite a while ago. I'm not 100% sure of what the other building design, the preformed.
Okay, sounds like you'll take a look and get back to us on it.
We're happy to.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm ready for a motion.
Well, so question for Adam on the motion, because we've discussed that there's, option 1 and option 2 were both, acceptable from Endline's end. They're comfortable with option 1, no problem. And I think the current budget is just for option 1. So are you comfortable with that as well? If
Yes.
we say this motion, that's what we're doing, we're good.
Yes.
Okay.
To be clear, Megan, option 2 with the 80-gallon surge tank wouldn't add much cost to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But-
just want to know what we're approving.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, no problem.
more clarity for me, I'm very comfortable. If you both are comfortable, that's great.
Yeah, if we could leave it open to option.
Or yeah, I
Three.
don't think the motion as is says one way or the other, but
Yeah.
I'm not dive into details. So, and then, yeah, I guess, we've talked about the building a bit, but I'm gonna leave, if we're getting to 100% design after we approve tonight, there's space for if there's cost savings of what we need or don't need in a building, that's within your wheelhouse.
For sure.
Still, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you have a question or?
No, I was just going to say we could approve option 1 and 4.
Well, it doesn't say either way, so I think we're good to go.
As direction or.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah, then I move, we deem the critical path items complete, with the use of option 1 or 2 in the surge analysis, to the satisfaction of council. And direct staff to work with Endline Energy to complete the remaining phase 2 tasks at a total budgeted cost of $196,310.
Moved by Councilor Saunders.
Well, second.
Second by Tim. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just make a comment, I just want to thank you all for your patience as we came to you in September and you had good questions that you brought to us and I appreciate that chance to do some homework. In addition to the items that Adam and Andrew mentioned about visiting Bellevue, Adam also talked with Stoner Bell, who was the city's engineer on the project at the time. He contacted, I think, someone at the city of Logan, Utah, which was, we had heard about their experience and we wanted to double check with that. I really appreciate all of the time that Adam and his team and Andrew, he spent a lot of time with Andrew, that you gave us time as staff to be much more comfortable with this project. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for very thoroughly answering the questions that we had.
Great. Good job.
Thanks, Adam.
That brings us to the consent agenda. We have quite a mishmash this evening. We have about 50 pages of stuff that I hope you had a chance to look through. I would entertain a motion.
I have two.
Can we pull the OLCC license, please?
Okay, so we're going to go in order. Gladys requests that number 3 be pulled off. So now we have items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 on the consent agenda.
I have an edit to the minutes from, I think it's the November 27th meeting.
So item number 1, Megan's going to speak to an edit. Other things before we start to proceed. Great. So the three is off. Megan, please, what's your edit?
Yes, page 21 of the packet, the fourth paragraph down, this is in the mural discussion. It said council discussed and agreed to not allow murals in the downtown area, which is not what we decided. So I talked to Jen earlier, change that to say council agreed to allow murals in the downtown area, but not allow them facing Oak Street or on contributing buildings, which I believe is what we actually
Is everyone okay with that?
majority agreed to.
Yeah, that was in the historical Oak district.
Yeah, historic downtown.
Yep. Everybody got that? We good? Captured? Okay, great. So that's an edit to the meeting minutes of November 27.
And then, sorry, 3 more paragraphs down, where it currently says council agreed to evaluate this in 2 years. I asked Jen to go back because I didn't remember that. And it was Council Rivera advised revisiting after 2 years. So just clarifying that.
That was not a majority opinion that was mentioned by Councilor Rivera.
Right. And not that I'm opposed to it, but yeah.
And everybody okay with that edit as well? Great. Those 2 edits. Thank you, Megan. So with those 2 edits, I suggest we could pass 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 with a single motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Moved by Grant.
I second.
Second by Councilor Rivera. Any discussion on this part of the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, now item number 3 has not yet been voted upon. Gladys, will you give us a brief statement, please?
Yeah, I will be abstaining from OLCC permit application approval. This is not a reflection of these businesses or their owners. Rather, that I object to the fact that we do not have enough transportation options for people who visit these establishments. As a result, they may end up getting behind the wheel and putting themselves and others at risk. If we and our community partners are able to provide adequate transportation during late evenings and weekends, I will be happy to start approving OLCC applications again.
Thank you, Councilor. I would entertain a motion.
I move.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Paulson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Okay, good job, everybody. Thank you. Takes us to discussion items, Urban Renewal Agency Governing Board membership.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Bear with me for just 1 minute while I get a PowerPoint going.
Does anybody know what, Jay?
She's been managing it for a couple of years.
Yeah, she's been managing. Oh, great. Great, thanks. Yeah, I don't know.
right. Okay, thank you, everyone. Mayor Blackburn, members of the city council, I'm in front of you with a urban renewal agency matter that is before the city council specifically. This is addressing the governance of the Urban Renewal Agency Board. It was on the Urban Renewal Agency's work plan to address their governance, bylaws, advisory committee membership, and as well as updating the IGA between the agency and the city for the agency's work plan. But that really starts at the top with the governing board membership. And at their December 11th meeting, the Urban Renewal Agency Board approved addressing that in a phased way, which puts the ball in your court as city council. So starting with the governing board membership, and then moving down. So when approaching this topic, I first researched what other urban renewal agencies in Oregon do. Looking at 38 other agencies, about 76 use their city council only. 13% includes representatives from other taxing districts, as the city of Hood River has done since it created an urban renewal agency in 1987. And then 11% included at-large members of the community on their urban renewal agency governing board. Those typically are agencies that do not have an advisory committee. So getting into the merits of these possible alternatives, there really is no optimal or best. It's purely policy decision on your end. But there are some, I'd say, characteristics of the different options. So for city council only, some benefits of that is it allows urban renewal agency business to be conducted at any regular city council meeting rather than needing to schedule with other entities. It eliminates any risk at all that the urban renewal agency's policies may differ from the city's policies or policy direction, which is important given that functionally, it really truly is the same staff, the same building, same in every other way. So if you have different policy directions, that creates a bit of a conundrum. Just a small matter is executive sections can be at the end of the meeting where we have to schedule them for a time limited amount of time at the beginning of the meeting in order to facilitate representatives from other entities participating. The district representation, it gives a visible expression of acknowledging that overlapping districts are foregoing some of their tax growth to support our activities, and then puts them as having a true decision-making authority over the work of the agency. And for the new West Side district, there's a definitely clear nexus between parks, housing, transportation, as well as extending into the unincorporated areas of the county. So those are all possible places where we may have a nexus with existing taxing districts that have those programs in there as their mission. One complicated to that is if we intend to work with these agencies to say jointly purchase a park or jointly develop a park or do something else that requires an IGA, that could be a difficult position for a representative to then be on both sides of an intergovernmental agreement. And also one alternative, if we want district representation without requiring a district representative to attend every meeting and opine on every urban renewal agency decision, is have some sort of formalized periodic joint meeting, presentation, or some other report that happens at given intervals to engage with overlapping taxing districts. And lastly, including at-large representation allows the board to solicit individuals that may have subject matter expertise on urban renewal or economic development considerations, or solicit people who may have different perspectives than those of the people already sitting and elected to be on the urban renewal agency board. So as we discuss the various options, have a proposed structure that may help facilitate the discussion tonight. If the city council chose to change the urban renewal agency governance to be only the city council, as the majority of other cities do. Staff can return with an ordinance to enact that change relatively simply and easily. So that's, I think, a first logical decision. If you're choosing to have additional representatives sit on the urban renewal agency board, then it become, I think, if they're choosing whether it be district representation or at large. In either case, I think we would need to come back later. If for district representation, I would come back after going out and reaching out to the other districts to see whether or not they have any interest in participating in an urban renewal agency board. You know, there's any innumerable amounts of numbers of combinations of ways that you could include district representation. So before going through all those machinations, I would recommend we make sure that we have interesting and willing partners at the other end of the table who may want to add more unpaid meetings to their schedule. And then if you want at large, again, we would say we would staff would do additional research on that alternative and bring back recommendations to you at a future meeting. So with that preliminary discussion, I'm happy to answer any questions or facilitate your deliberations.
Start off with any question. Gladys has her hand up.
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment.
Usually the way, Tim, yep, see it, thanks.
So, Will, if there is a potential not to close the waterfront district, do you think that would affect the decision of the port representatives at this point?
Oh, thank you for that. And I forgot to mention the letter that's in your packet that we have had Port of Hood River Commissioner representation on the Urban Renewal Agency Board since 1987. They've always had 2 seats, but with focus shifting to the west side and to the Heights, the commissioners discussed this at their December meeting and provided the letter that's in your packet, formally saying that they did not have interest in continuing to hold seats on the Urban Renewal Agency Board. So to answer Councilor Cunahan's question, they did say that they wanted to be engaged and made aware of any potential future actions in the waterfront area. As it stands right now, there is a controlling urban renewal agency resolution that says that all remaining maximum indebtedness is dedicated to stormwater, to the stormwater project. Obviously, a resolution just can be changed by another resolution. So I think if not having formal representation on the board, they would certainly want to be consulted and have the opinion of the port fully considered.
Thanks, Will.
So we usually discuss and then have motions. In this case, it occurs to me, we could test out to see if we're in agreement. Somebody could make a motion. Don't have to do it that way, but
Well, I would move we include some overlapping districts. If we're gonna go that route.
moved by Saunders. Motion dies for lack of a second.
Around this point, I'll move that we only have city council as the governing body of the urban renewal districts.
Moved by Paulson.
Second.
Second by
City
Cunahan.
council only? Sorry, I couldn't hear that. City council only?
Yeah, city council only.
Yeah, moved by Paulson, second by Cunahan. Discussion. Thumb up from Gladys.
My discussion around that is we can certainly involve other districts at any point through any process. But when it comes to actually the governance and voting, I see no reason why I shouldn't just sit with city council.
Other deliberation, Mark?
Yeah, my gut is the same. I think that we have a responsibility to, use those other districts as part of ad hocs and that be, truly genuine in giving their opinions and stuff, especially the county and Parks and Cat for the west side. Certainly if we open waterfront up again and the heights, so I think we need to improve what we've been doing with URAC. And that might look different with different ad hoc committees or even longer than that, subcommittees related to individual districts. But Megan's point is good as well. Sorry. So the motion aligns with my gut.
I will make a point now. I think twofold. One, I actually think having it just be council and us being able to just do board business at every council meeting makes it very easy for us to forget who we are representing and mesh how we're deciding things. I think it's confusing for the public. It's already a little weird when we do an IGA with the city and the board where we're, yes, even on the board, we're the majority. But at least there's some clear distinction of this is urban renewal, we're deciding is urban renewal. And I think that can get really messy if there's no actual clarity around that. And I think secondly, especially overlapping district, the county, where West Side includes a lot of acres that are not actually in the city right now. And even in the Heights, where quite a bit of our outreach and public engagement was from county folks who did not feel they were being represented in the conversation. I think having at least one county commissioner on there to represent folks who don't feel represented by city councilors is critical to make sure people feel like there is some equal footing and some actual political conversation and collaboration, and not just the city, stealing overlapping districts money and doing whatever we want with it. So.
Sorry, Tim, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Thank you.
That's okay. I guess kind of my bottom line on all this, unless we're willing to provide a majority to folks other than the city council, that in the end, the city council is pretty much driving it anyways. So it just seems like we can have the conversation with other people, but other than that, it just seems like a unnecessary complication.
Thank you, Tim. Doug?
I'm amenable to the idea of reaching out to the other agencies to see if anybody's interested. I mean, obviously the port was super interested before because a lot was going on, not just in that area at the waterfront, but area where they were landowners, et cetera. So I understand that. Has there been any? I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question at this point. Probably not, I guess. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, has any other agency expressed interest? I know that we haven't asked anybody yet, but is there a sense that people would like to participate?
We haven't reached out, but no one has also proactively expressed any interest to me.
I will say when we were shopping around the West Side urban renewal formation, no one explicitly said, oh, I want to be on the board, because that wasn't on the table. But Kat especially certainly said they want to make sure they're engaged throughout and not just talked to at the beginning and then kind of dropped from the conversation.
I appreciate the points that are being made in terms of structurally designing it that will inevitably result in discussion, that there'll be somebody at the table for discussion. I agree with Tim, like if it's 7-2, I mean, functionally it's city council's decision, but building in a structure that ensures broader discussion is of value. Tim, your hand is still up, or is it just a Zoom glitch?
Sorry, my arm's getting tired.
Yep, okay. Others? Grant?
Just for clarification, my motion does not preclude involvement. We could involve the other districts at any point in terms of input, as they're welcome to a city council meeting. Welcome to give public comment through any urban renewal process. And this only refers to the governing body itself.
Gladys.
My only comment was that whenever we are discussing an item that includes any other agency, that we just be clear and give staff the direction to make sure that those agency members or committee, whomever it may be, is aware And hopefully they'll show up to our meeting to give some sort of input or feedback.
We have a motion on the table. It doesn't mean we can't keep deliberating. Sorry, just reminding us. Go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, there's a number of comments from the last few counselors that is, well, people can come to us and talk to us. And this is a bit of what we talked about Saturday of the, community engagement of invite other people to come to us. And I think that really it's on us to go out to other folks and to actually, if we want to be building community collaboration and building partnerships with our other partner agencies, we need to be reaching out, not just saying, well, if you have an opinion, you'll tell us.
We can do that.
I'll just say I would be a lot more comfortable voting for city council only if we did some due diligence and asked. It may not necessarily change my opinion, I guess. I don't know. It seems that we have the opportunity to ask. We don't have to agree that other agencies will be included to ask, correct? Well, we could fact find.
Yeah, if you want to table this and give staff direction to go fan out and talk to the other districts, happy to do that. Recommended in the staff report to provide targets if you think there are ones that the council is particularly interested in. I would also note, if you do want to institutionalize participation of the overlapping districts, as I mentioned in my presentation, like through annual joint meeting, or we're saying certain things must go in front of a comment period to other entities, or really any other way other than a formal board seat, that would be something we could write into the bylaws when we get to that.
So I would observe if we were to go the direction I'm hearing Doug suggest, I would think the mechanics would be we would vote this motion down and give staff the request to go out and ask and come back. That seems like how we would get there if we wanted to get there. Mark.
My understanding is Will is saying that independent of this motion, we can beef up a whole bunch of different relationship things that, I think are a good idea, whether they're on the board or not. So I see it as an independent thing than the motion.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I also understand it to be in the reformation of the governing body of the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. We could in our bylaws say that when other districts are impacted by a particular whatever, we go out and we involve them in some form or fashion. That I believe that step would be after this one, correct?
Any sort of institutionalizing of engagement outside of a dedicated board seat could be done, would be done during bylaws, or even at bylaws are like very it's like the constitution of the urban renewal agency, so it's very solid. It could even be done by resolution if you want it to be a little bit more malleable. But if you want to keep the option open of a dedicated board seat, that would be the time to table this and ask us to do the outreach ahead of solidifying the governing board.
Sure. So what I mean is, if we want to institutionalize another board seat, but if we're only talking about, we're still involving them, but the council only being the voting members, we could still move forward with the motion and still include all the other districts in our practices as required in our bylaws, which we would set. So that I hope would address any concerns of inclusion that we're hoping to all involve.
That makes sense to me, and we can even include, as you're all mentioning, that staff must include these overlapping districts, I don't know, before the next council meeting or something along those lines.
I'll just say that going into this, I was sort of leaning 75% of the cities do this. And after hearing Megan's comments and thinking back to our work plan in which we want to demonstrate that we're building bridges with other government agencies, I feel like it could be a wasted opportunity, at least to not check. nobody wants to do it, or agencies say, sure, I just want to show up and complain about the fact that I'm not, getting taxes for, I mean, that's one thing, but I feel like just blowing past it is probably not something I'm comfortable with right now.
So we have a motion on the table. Shall we vote on this motion?
I just want to make sure I'm capturing correctly. The goal is we table this now. Staff goes out and talks to the county, 911, all these other overlapping districts first to see who wants to participate. Then this item would come back to us after staff gives us an update on who would like to participate moving forward. That's what Doug and Megan, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think that at least there's information to decide if, depending on interest, one, if there's no interest, I think there's an easy answer. If there is interest, then there's a discussion where council can still decide they want it to just be council, or they do want to include some or all of the interested parties.
And Will, the only ones who've expressed, or the only other body that's expressed interest to not be included is, it's only been one group that has said, no, we don't want to participate moving forward. None of the other overlapping districts have been approached.
That's correct. Only the Port of Hood River has said that they no longer need to participate on the board.
Yeah, correct. Just for everybody's edification, current motion is to make the city council and only the city council the governing body only. Any other involvement is outside of that particular motion. So voting yes would make us, city council, the governing body only. Voting no would not, and thus table this for further motions or further discussion.
All right, I'm going to call the question. Is okay? All in favor of city council being the only deciding body of the URA, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 1, 2, 3. I heard Tim, Grant, Mark. Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay.
3, 4, 3 against. Chair votes no. Staff will bring us back some research about interest of other agencies to participate.
Absolutely.
Great.
Happy to do it.
Waterfront stormwater.
Before we move forward, can I just, hey, Will, thanks for taking the time to go through and doing all this research and bringing it back to us on many other cities within the state of Oregon. So I just wanted to thank you for that work.
Can
Thank
I
you
just pose one more
Go ahead,
question?
Tim.
Is it what if like 5 or 6 folks say yes? Who do we reach out to? Everybody?
We'll burn that bridge when we come to it.
Well, I mean, who are you going to reach out to, Will?
I think Will's going to reach out to each agency and find out, and then maybe a rotation, or we'll decide that then. But
I think that there's still the decision of, I mean, I'm hoping, and will politely phrase this as we're just mulling options, not saying you've got an invite, but either we include none of them, or we decide some of them in some whatever order, or we say all, and that's going to be the decision once we have information.
Is there a scenario where you would say no?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Is there a scenario where you would say no? We understand your interest, but
I think that since, we ask the question and we get 3 people that are interested, we could say, or 3 agencies that are interested, we could have the conversation. It still might be a no, but we could have the conversation. Right now, I don't feel like we can have the conversation. We haven't asked. So,
Read my point.
great, thanks, Will. Moving on, Randy, thank you. push the green.
The red saucer, right? Yeah, that. Make it-
Okay, sorry. Good evening, council. We wanted to take this opportunity to give you guys an update on the waterfront storm project. So Matt Huxley, the project manager for Tetra Tech, is on Zoom with us. I'm assuming. I haven't seen him pop up yet, but and he's going to do a presentation. And I think probably just do the presentation followed by some questions to get you guys up to speed where the project is sitting and where it's going.
Thank you.
Matt, are you on?
It's on. Muted.
Sorry, Randy, can you hear me?
Oh, yep. Yeah, did you hear the introduction there? And
Yes, I did. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity just to give you an update on the Stormline relocation project. This is just an update on the presentation that I gave at the last council meeting back in September. So moving ahead 3 months, just a quick recap on just the overview of the project. So if you recall, phase 2 project includes installation of the new outfall, and then about 625 feet of 36-inch storm drain line from the new outfall back to where we left it at phase 1, and then plugging about 850 feet of the existing 48-inch pipe from North 8th Street out to the existing outfall and including the existing outfall. So right now, the status of the phase 2 project is we've hired a general contractor back in November, and that's Beam Excavation. We're currently going through material and equipment submittal reviews, and then we were anticipating breaking ground the 3rd week of January, but it might be as soon as the end of this week. And then the first element of this project will be to install the new head wall at the new outfall and then work south back towards North 8th Street from there. The purpose of that is to meet the in-water work window limits on the Columbia River, which terminate on March 15th. And then the overall project scheduled for completion, or the overall phase of this project is scheduled for completion June sometime, hopefully early June. And then also just point out that this project does also include some stormwater treatment for North 8th Street. We'll be installing cartridge vaults on the west side and the east side of North 8th Street. So that's the current status of phase 2. For phase 3, so that's the next phase. So phase 3 includes installing stormwater treatment facilities downtown, and then rerouting flows from the wetland to the wetland north of the railroad and taking those flows to the west to an existing outfall out here to the west. Purpose of that is just to reduce the hydraulic loading on the new stormwater piping in the waterfront area. And then at the same time, we'll be restoring and then enhancing the wetland area between the freeway and the railroad. And then we'll plug some existing culverts that are currently taking that water from the wetland into the existing storm piping on the waterfront area. So again, just to point out some of the treatment goals of this project overall. So first of all, we need to meet DEQ and Army Corps of Engineer permit requirements. We have 401 and 404 water quality certifications from DEQ and Corps of Engineers because of the wetland work. And this triggers the requirement for treating any water that's discharging into the wetland. Other reasons for the treatment are to meet future MS4 permit requirements. So once the city's population reaches 10,000, you'll be required to obtain a municipal stormwater permit, and treatment will be a requirement. And then also just to point out that this project will improve the water quality of the water in the wetland and overall in the Columbia River. And then because we're still including vegetated rain gardens in the downtown area in Columbia Street, Industrial Street, ultimately it'll enhance the streetscape downtown also. just a quick note on the DEQ and city stormwater treatment standards. City standards currently require that 80% of all suspended solids be removed in the treatment facilities. And then DEQ's requirements and cities are to treat at least 90% of all of the stormwater runoff from impervious areas, which includes the roofs, roads, driveways, and sidewalks. There's always a preference to infiltrate stormwater on site if you can. There's reasons for this. And then there's always a preference for vegetated treatment facilities as well, notably for streetscape enhancement for this project specifically. So with that in mind, we always have a hierarchy of how you select those treatment options. Like I mentioned, the preference first is with vegetated treatment. So that would be with a swale, say constructed wetland, or a planter using readily available soil materials. If that's not realistic, then the second option we would look at is vegetated treatment, but using proprietary engineered media. So this would be soil that's prepared by a company such as Oldcastle, the Biopod brand, or Contact, which is their Filterra unit. The advantage of that is that it has a much, much higher filtration rate, and it would allow for a much smaller footprint. If that's not possible, then the third option would be quote unquote mechanical treatment. So that's what you might see in town with the cartridge vaults. And then last but not least, if you can't do any treatment at all on site, then you would look at doing treatment elsewhere and then gaining credit for the area that you couldn't treat. And DEQ allows this. Some of the major factors that have gone into the selection of the different stormwater treatment facilities include the site constraints. As I pointed out last time, and as you know, downtown is very, very space constrained. You would need easements if on private property, and then just the physical topography. Steep sided slopes can be a major constraint, as is existing parking lots and parking spaces, for example. Also, the existing storm drain depths. You always need an overflow for the facility because it's only designed to treat up to 90% of the volume. In high rainfall events, that water's got to go somewhere. It cannot infiltrate, so it'll overflow, and it'll have to overflow back into the storm system. So the lowest point of that storm water treatment facility has to be higher than the stormwater pipe it's connecting into. And because we're working with existing storm piping, the constraint here is the depth of those existing pipes. And then lastly, cost is a major factor as well. Obviously, we would choose the least cost option that meets this hierarchy above. So the original concept as we envisioned it included originally 40 vegetated facilities distributed throughout downtown, 3 biopods, and then 7 cartridge vaults. It included a mix of flow through and then direct infiltration on site. We were proposing that all of these vegetated facilities would be hand watered. But then we also found that there was a concern with infiltrating these facilities downtown. Much of the area downtown is underlain by rock and hardpan. So there's a concern that if you infiltrate on site, then the water goes into the ground and then pops out downslope and then potentially daylights on private properties. So it's, we consider that an unacceptable risk. Another factor with choosing whether to infiltrate or putting the water back into the storm system is that ultimately that water is discharging to the wetland. So if you're infiltrating on site, you could reduce the water that's going into the wetland and thus potentially adversely impact the wetland biology and the ecology of the plant species. Essentially, you could dry it out. The concept wasn't quite complete. At that time, we hadn't determined what we were going to be doing for several rooftops downtown. That includes the Wakuma building, Big 7, and the Union building. For these buildings, finding treatment on site was proven to be difficult. And then we also found that a number of these proposed facilities could be removed and would still meet the DEQ and city treatment requirements. And then 2 of the proposed biopod locations we determined were not really feasible just due to the need to get an easement from the Port of Hood River and then also impacts to some existing retaining walls. So where things currently stand are right here. We've cut down the number of the vegetative facilities to 16, but in doing so, we've had to increase the number of biopods to 7. And then we're now looking at 3 cartridge vaults. And instead of doing treatment on site for those roofs, the Big 7, the Coma building and the Union building, we will be doing mitigation treatment up at the Public Works yard. Ultimately, that will have an even greater benefit than if we were treating the roof runoff, because the water that's running off from the Public Works yard is significantly dirtier than the water that's coming off of those roofs. So ultimately, it's a better solution for the all-round for water quality in general. And then we're also proposing to do irrigation for all of the vegetative planters. So putting in irrigation systems at each of those planters with sprinkler heads. It's DEQ's preference. It's less maintenance in the long run. And most importantly, there's just a much better chance that those plants will actually survive that initial establishment period. We're also converting all of those proposed infiltration facilities to flow through, except at 2 locations where we know we have very, very good infiltration. And it's at the foot of basically it's the northern periphery of downtown, just on the south side of the railroad. So there's no chance that water can daylight further downstream because there is no downstream. Thereby that eliminates the risk of flooding on private properties, preserves the wetland ecology, requires taking fewer parking stalls. And then ultimately, we perform this value engineering to remove these redundant facilities, and then ultimately reduces the project construction cost. So this slide here just shows what the current project looks like downtown. All of these color-coded dots are individual treatment facilities. The blue dots show vegetative facilities that are flow through. The magenta dots are biopods, and then the orange dots are cartridge filter vaults, and then the red dots are the 2 infiltration facilities that we're keeping as infiltration. I should point out that this is a little bit out of date because there's a couple of facilities on here that we've since taken out. That includes this one right here, so we do not need to install a biopod on the south side of Wasco Street. And we do not need to install these 4 cartridge vaults down here on the Port of Hood River property, because this area is going to be included in the mitigation site up at the Public Works yard. And then lastly, in closing, just to give you a current status of phase 3. So these 2 infiltration facilities require easements with the Wacoma property owner. So we're currently negotiating in the final stages of the negotiation this week, and then finalizing the design to include this mitigation area up at the Public Works yard and the irrigation system. So we should be completing this phase of design by the end of this month, and then looking to advertise for construction contractors by the middle of February, and then completing this phase by the end of 2024. And that just wraps up my brief presentation.
Thank you, Matt.
Let's see if I can stop sharing. Okay.
Ready for questions, Randy?
Yes, yeah.
Gladys.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt, for that presentation. I believe our population is, Abigail, maybe correct me, close to 9,000. Yes, no?
Yes, I usually say about 8,800.
So you mentioned that once the population reaches 10,000, there's additional permits that have to be required. And it sounds like completion would take place at the end of 2024. So as we imagine that the population will continue to grow within the next, year or so, how is that going to have an impact on this project? What sort of what's going to take place once we reach 10,000? And let's say that we reach 10,000 in a year, hypothetically.
That's a great question. So it won't affect our project at all, because essentially this project is going to meet the MS4 requirements. So that addresses that concern. What happens when you reach a population of 10,000? At that time, DEQ is not going to come to you and say, right now you have to get a permit. You have to work towards getting the permit. And that includes, I could spend all night talking about the requirements of an MS4 permit, but that's a process that will start once you reach that threshold. But at least with that in mind, this project is giving you a head start because now you're already treating those 26 acres of downtown plus 2 acres up at the public works yard. So.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Matt, for your presentation. Can you kind of walk us through the process you went through to determine redundant facilities?
So with redundancy, what I mean by that is that you've got a facility that's treating the stormwater, then it's putting the stormwater back into the stormwater system, but it's also mixing with dirty water that's not been treated. So even though the water's been treated in the system upstream, the fact that it's now mixing with that dirty water again means it's got to be retreated. So you don't get credit if you've already treated the water, but it's becoming dirty again. So I know the previous concept wasn't fully defined, but when we looked at this again, we realized, well, there's some construction cost savings we can realize if we take out some of the facilities now and still meet the water quality goals, but at the same time saving the project money up front. Now, those other facilities that were proposed, I mean, they have other functions too. I mean, essentially a landscaping aspect and a streetscape aspect, which is fine, but it's not needed to meet the project water quality goals, this specific project goals. So.
With respect to passing water through to the wetland. So if the vegetated rain gardens that were eliminated passes all the water through to the other places, where does the water reduction come from?
So the water reduction, so those vegetated facilities that would infiltrate wouldn't infiltrate all of the water that's being collected. It would just be a portion of it. Mm-hmm. So there'd be a little bit of flow reduction, but it wouldn't be significant, and it wouldn't be as much as if we'd been infiltrating in other areas as well. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, that's an aspect of the design that we're still trying to determine if it makes more sense just to pass that water back into the storm system.
Right.
So that's something that should be figured out by the end of next week.
So where does the water to the wetland come from right now?
It's just runoff, roof runoff, sidewalks, roadways, and it's going to catch basins, then catch basins into piping, and then it's piped into the wetlands from underneath the railroad.
So it's pretty much untreated.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a little bit of water that comes in off of the freeway, which is also untreated, but right now none of it's treated at all.
Hmm. Yeah. Can you explain to us what a biopod is?
Yeah, a biopod it's a proprietary system. It's manufactured by Oldcastle. And the term relates to the soil mix. So they've developed a soil mixture that allows for a much higher filtration rate than, say, a more common amended soil mixture that, say, City of Portland is approved. So it's proprietary in the sense that you have to buy this media from them, which is the major disadvantage. However, and then there's an equivalent product from a company called Contact. They call it Filterra. They're slightly different, but essentially have the same benefit in that you can achieve the same amount of treatment in a very, very small footprint. So that's really what it is. It's just it's a product name essentially.
And how often does that need to be changed?
Based on, depends on how dirty the water is that's entering that facility. Mm-hmm. For a typical roadway, downtown street, it's about once every 10 years. They do recommend putting a thin, like 3-inch mulch layer on top of the soil mix, and that's just that it capture that initial flush of sediment and oil, and that may need to be replaced more frequently, say once a year. But it's a very simple process. You just scrape it off, bag it, and then replace it. And when I say mulch, I mean a bag of mulch you can buy from Home Depot.
And that's something the city staff would do.
I believe that is the case, yes. Or you could contract with Oldcastle, it's your choice. You could buy the media directly from them. Yeah. And I should also point out too that the media is installed in vaults. So over time, other products might become available, or mixes that you can put in there yourself and still meet the same requirements. But that concrete vault is just in place that you can put the media into.
Can you explain to us what an underpipe An
under drain. Yeah, so, right. So the treatment occurs, the water enters the top of that facility and it filters down through the bottom. Now, if it's pure infiltration, there's nothing underneath. It's just open to the bottom and it'll just go out underneath. But with an under drain, the intent is that you then collect that water at the bottom of the facility and you pipe it back out, either back into an existing storm drain or an offsite dry well somewhere.
So does that clean water mix with the dirty water then?
No, it doesn't. Not with this concept, it doesn't. No, because everything, so once it goes back into the storm piping, everything that's coming down that storm pipe has been treated upstream.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Megan, then Mark.
I think this is more for Randy, but so Public Works would be taking on the maintenance of this long term, is that correct?
That is the thought right now. The landscaping portion of it would be contracted out. There would be some training of Public Works crews to change out the material and such. So yes, at the moment that is the plan.
So I guess two questions within that. One, irrigation, is that irrigation for like the first 2 or 3 years and then these plants are going to grow on their own once they're established, or is that irrigation in perpetuity? So
it's irrigation in perpetuity. Matt might be helping me speak to this a little bit more, but from everything that I've been given, the irrigation is recommended in order. It's inconsistent water. If you don't, you end up hand watering. And I had this discussion with Matt, so I'd like to pass this.
Yeah,
out
sure,
him.
absolutely, yeah. So
he's the one that briefed me, so
no, happy to do so. So it's in perpetuity, but the first 2 years of establishment are critical. That's when you need to make sure those plants are getting sufficient water. They're going to die very quickly. And I will say Hood River is in a special challenge because of unique, I would say, climate. You have a combination of strong winds, low humidity in summer, and then very low temperatures in wintertime. So it's very difficult to keep plants alive in the establishment period. So if you're going to be hand watering, you're going to have to be doing it every single day almost for the first 2 years. And then because of that wind, it's especially challenging. So with the irrigation system, it's getting the water it needs, especially if it's combined with soil humidity sensors. So it'll just automatically trigger those irrigation systems to run based on how dry that soil is. So during that initial establishment period, with an irrigation system, you don't have staff out there every single day watering. You're freeing up a lot of resources. And then once those plants have been established, then it's basically as needed. I don't have the landscape architect on the call right now. They're designing the plant palette for all of these facilities, but we are absolutely keeping the unique climate in mind and specifying drought tolerant species and native species to the extent that we can. That's really important that we use native species on this project. So it's a bit of a toss up between, do you pay up front for the irrigation system or do you pay to have someone going out there every single day in the summertime to water? And in our experience, and also in consultation with DEQ, it's also their preference that we put in irrigation systems.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, from a staff time and certainly plant establishment, I get it. I just hate the idea that we're gonna have to water things forever. From the water conservation narrative.
Sure, and with the appropriate species, like I say, native species, drought tolerant species, it's intermittent watering. It's only as it's needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
To that point, on the establishment period, there's a lot of weeding that's also required because as the natives getting established, the weeds are enjoying the water. So make no mistake, there's a significant maintenance aspect to the establishment period.
And we have reached out to Crystal Greens, and I believe we provided some rough estimates for some maintenance for this.
Sorry.
That's okay. This is all within that of, so there's maintenance. I know there's like intermittently it sounds like maybe 8 years changing, or 8-10 years changing the medium. Do we have an idea of like how much extra staff time or money this is going to kind of be on average annually to maintain these systems, or? I know it's gonna be wildly swinging between years.
You know, trying to figure that out. We're gonna sub out the day-to-day landscape maintenance. But the actual changing out the materials, I've just been briefed on how that works. It's a matter of using our vac truck, sucking it all out. But there is an inspection. There is a periodic inspection as well to make sure that we do need to indeed change out the material. So, and that mulch on the top is one of those things that we can change out periodically. Helps to, like Matt was saying, it filters out some of the oil before it hits the proprietary media there. It really doesn't seem like it's going to take a lot of time. It'll take some training time, and then Matt, if I'm messing any of this up, please jump in.
Not at all. Yeah, no, that's very true, Randy. Yeah.
There'll be some training time, and then once the training happens, you have the 7 biopods that when they need changing out, it's a matter of sucking it out and adding it back in.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly true. Yeah.
Okay.
How many square feet is the planting area now? I've lost track over time of, I mean, is it like a 1/4 acre, or is it the total planted spaces?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I can get it to the council after the session.
It's more just is it bigger than a bread box type question?
Yeah, I mean, the standard size of a plant is, maybe 10 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide. But they vary in size. They've been designed to fit the specific locales.
Okay, so not super big.
No.
For the filtration media, I'm looking at this in the long run. 10 years from now or 20 years from now, these guys have retired and they don't sell it. So I'm a little nervous about proprietary media recipes. I would love it if the city could own the recipe or have the right to the recipe so that we could make it ourselves at some point. It doesn't feel too unreasonable to request that. They're going to have an economic advantage because they have, they make it all the time.
Yeah.
So, it's not to go around anyone. It's just to not be stuck when they decide to retire. So is that possible? And I did talk to Randy about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a conversation that we've been having with Oldcastle, and it's a valid consideration for sure. And that's the extent. That's why we've really aimed to try to design in generic plants, or not generic, using a readily available soil mix. For example, right now we're specifying a mix that the city of Portland uses and can be obtained by at least a dozen different suppliers in the metro area here. But for the biopod facilities, we're using those really where we can only use those. Like I said, I don't have a definitive answer right now. I mean, you're absolutely right. Companies do come and go, they get acquired. I will say Oldcastle has been established for decades. They're the biggest precast concrete manufacturer in the country. So, and then Contact too, the major competitors, also established company that's been around for almost as long and been doing stormwater treatment for decades. So, but one thing we'll look at is seeing if there are some other mixes we can use. I will say for the infiltration facilities, the 2 proposed infiltration facilities down there at the north end of the property, in the Wacoma property, they're going to have to use a soil mix that's a little bit faster draining than, say, the City of Portland soil mix. So we've looked at doing a blend that can be mixed just with a local landscape supplier. So we might be able to do something similar with the biopods in future as well. And like I said, the beauty of those systems are that the concrete vaults essentially, so you can just suck out the media and just put in a new media in future. So it's not like you have to buy that media specifically for that facility in future. The key is that it just has to be able to filter at a much higher rate than the City of Portland mix, which is what we're specifying for all of the other vegetative facilities.
More sand, yeah. So as long as, yeah, I guess my point is just, please make sure that Public Works has a long-term solution as far as.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. My last thing is I get a little bit of angst with the using treatment credits for the, those 4 facilities behind Wacoma Center. Are they, so my guess is that those are currently piped under the railroad directly and that you would just be leaving them the same?
Yeah, well, we actually don't know what those roofs do now. We've been given as-built drawings, which is great, but they don't show where those roof spouts connect to. So they're either doing one of 2 things. Either they're connecting into the existing storm drains and they're going into the wetland, or they're connected to dry wells and going directly into the ground. So ideally, we don't want to touch them for a couple of reasons. One is if they're going into the existing collection system, then they're replenishing that wetland. They're putting water into it. And although it's not treated water, it's roof runoff, which is a lot cleaner than streets and a lot cleaner again than the public works yard. So I get your concern about doing mitigation. We do prefer to treat on site, but ultimately in the bigger picture, we're improving water quality in surface water because that public works yard is still discharging ultimately into the Columbia River. And right now it's discharging water that's pretty dirty. So with this mitigation solution that we're proposing here, I think in the bigger picture, it's probably better for water quality as a whole to treat that water as opposed to treating the roof runoff.
And so you did an estimate of what those facilities would have gallons per treatment period, and that's what we're going to do up at the yard. That's the gist of it?
That is correct, yeah. And the mitigation credit's actually based on the area. So if you can't treat an area of roof, you got to treat an area of
square feet of impervious.
Correct, exactly. Yep. I mean, it would be worthwhile, I think, in the future, maybe looking at those roofs, but I think in the interest of this project in the short term, the mitigation is going to give a better solution for water quality overall, an equivalent price, rather equivalent cost of project cost.
And that water is no change. We're not mixing it with other untreated water, so it's basically no change from current state.
Not quite sure I understand the second part of the question, but the first part is that the water right now, it's, as far as I know, it's not mixing with any other treatment that exists downstream. But that part of the city's system does not go into the wetland. It actually discharges to an outfall to the west of wetland A. However, that outfall goes into wetland C. So I don't know if you recall, there's actually a series of 3 wetlands down there. There's the large wetland that everything downtown discharges to. And then there's 2 other smaller wetlands between that larger wetland and the river. So there is a larger outfall that discharges to one of the smaller wetlands to the west and then goes to the river. Well, the public works yard, that water is now, it currently goes into that outfall that discharges into the small wetlands. So this project's actually going to enhance the water that's going into that smaller wetland as well. So,
all right, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt. This is a very important, very complicated thing. I'm feeling like we're bumping up against the amount of time that we can afford council to spend on this. I don't know exactly how much more of this any of us want to do, but I'm noticing that, like, okay, we're designing, we're educating ourselves about many details of this stormwater system. I think we need to move on. How are folks feeling about that? Would folks like to spend some more time on this topic, or are folks ready to move on?
I'm done with my question. This is the whole gist of this whole system is we're gonna filter in then versus pipe, and so and this is a big part of that. So this cuts to the heart of why we're even doing this. So I'm done. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Randy. Sorry to jump in. I just felt like we were getting to a point.
Thank you.
Anything else for Randy or Matt? Great, thank you. Moving on. We're gonna take a break for 5 minutes. We actually have 4 executive sessions, so while it looks like we have there's a bunch of stuff yet to do, and here we go. Okay, thanks. We're going to reconvene here. Jen, anything for the city recorder? Abigail.
No, I just want to thank you all for Saturday's study session. I think there's been a little confusion in the public of they thought it was maybe a city and a county session. So just want to clarify, it was a city only study session to learn about annexation. I will connect with county administrator this week and we'll figure out next steps for a joint conversation with the county.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Committee reports. Gladys.
Nothing for me.
You stepped away for a moment. Doug.
Do you guys hear that? Yeah, nothing from me. Sorry, I don't know if you heard me.
Megan.
Hood River Sister City Program, the annual fundraiser, the Taste of Saruta, which is they're doing the bento boxes to go. Tickets are available. You can buy them from me or any other board member or email the Sister City. And then pickup is January 21st of this month. So please spread the word. It's important. So fundraising for this allows them to do my God, my brain doesn't work, but scholarships for middle schoolers and high schoolers to go out to Saruta or otherwise participate in the program. So it's an important part of getting our community members to learn about another culture.
Megan, so Sunday, the 21st.
Yes.
Doug.
Do we have any social media posts about this from the city?
I put one up for the Sister City, but I need to do more. And I
I'll
have
follow
not
up.
shared with the city itself.
Okay. I'll share that once it's
Anything
available.
else, Megan?
That is it. Thank you.
None for me. Grant?
None for me.
The Oregon Region 1 meeting was also tonight at the same time as City Council. So I'll be able to find out what happened there. They were supposed to be working on the 2-year work plan. So significant stuff, but I have no idea what it is.
For ODOT.
Yes, yeah, for ODOT.
Tim?
No committee meetings, but hopefully you guys receive the material I sent out on the Energy Council's weatherization plus equity efforts, which I think is a really good effort.
All right, moving on to mayor comments. I have two things. Bridge Aesthetics Committee. We have received an invitation from the Bridge Authority to have a representative on the Bridge Aesthetics Committee. Wanted to share that information with you all. If anyone is interested in serving that role, please let Abigail know. Any questions about that? Great. Also, after consulting with my equity counsel, I am moving ahead with suggesting that we put money in the budget to have the mayor's salary in case I'm not elected in November for $1,500 a month, so $18,000 in the budget. Shall we also suggest that council have a more meaningful stipend so that we could increase equity opportunities, socioeconomic equity, reaching to the city council? What is your, I wanted to ask you guys.
Have you talked about like a scholarship thing versus just a across the board, either for mayor or for councilors?
We haven't, although at this point it's just a budget question, so that could be entertained within that, yeah.
I think making a bucket of money is fine.
Right.
I think it makes sense to pay more. Do you imagine during budget is when we would actually decide amounts, or is that something that should be studied ahead of time? I guess is my main question.
I hadn't thought of that far through. I was just thinking, if we get to the, yeah, we can't do it because it's not in the budget, that's going to be annoying, so. So would you suggest we include something in the budget for it then, or?
Oh, yes, I think that, I mean, it's hard to say what we include if I don't know the amount, but I think we've discussed this at least peripherally for a number of years that certainly it's a barrier, the amount of time to, give to this potentially for childcare or just miss work and not, we get paid $50 before taxes. That's
great. So I will commit to
not ideal.
To coming up with the draft suggestion before election filing time. But the budget is the first step. Doug? Yep. Gladys, Tim, you okay with that?
No concerns for me. Thank you for your efforts.
Great. Thanks. That's a majority. I'm going to move ahead. That's all for mayor comments. Council comments. Gladys?
No comments from me. It was actually, well, it was nice seeing you all this last Saturday. I learned a lot. Thank you, Jen, for sending those slides from last Saturday. It's good to continue processing parts of those pieces in the conversation. So I look forward to more partnerships as we continue to think about what we need in order to make housing a possibility.
Tim?
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Doug?
Nothing for me.
Megan?
Real quick, I went to the county meeting back in December, but we haven't met since. So the new county administrator has started, obviously, you know, much like Abigail for her first year, she's just getting up to speed. But hoping we get to meet her at some point. And then the one other thing which I told Abigail and I think is being worked on is they had requested from the city some update on the Ran Road project. And in particular, you know, we we are/will be requesting some CET from them to help make that project pencil. And so staff is working through that and hopefully providing them with the information they need. But it was nice to make sure that they're feeling engaged and, you know, keeping up to date on our project, as they will be an important partner. So
Thanks for being a cross pollinator on that.
Two things. One, my main observation from Saturday is that a really deep discussion about with the county about how do we together work on housing stuff. I think that that's the real gist of the thing versus here's a couple teeny little green squares on the map. And then the other thing, so and I think Abigail is kicking this off, and I think we're gonna do great things. And then I just peeked and Michigan won the game against the Huskies. So my brother and my mom up in heaven are happy, but maybe not so many people around here.
My daughter in Seattle, sad. Grant.
I have family over in Illinois, so I'll be sure to boo them. Boo. Couple things from the bridge. They are working on hearing from public entities. The city of Bingen stopped by the meeting earlier today to pitch or talk about the idea of all the people that are supposedly going to come build the bridge need a place to stay. And so how localities can potentially integrate that demand into creating housing types. And they are more than welcome to hear more pitches from localities or even private developers in partnership with localities to help that be a thing. They wouldn't necessarily get in the middle of a negotiation between a contractor and a municipality or a private entity, but they can at least connect dots. Another thing about the bridge is, as you guys are aware, grant cycles and funding and trying to line everything on a timeline is fun. So one request that they have or whatnot that they would like to at least ask about is if it was possible for any local entity to provide a line of credit for cash flow reasons to bridge gaps in between when bills come due and when grant funds are rewarded. If there is interest in a proposal, we test the water with you guys. If there is, we can explore that. If not, not. So, yeah.
Abigail, could you imagine kind of looping Chris in on that for a first conversation?
Absolutely. Making a note right now.
Thanks.
Yep. There's no defined terms. That could be another discussion. But yep.
Anything else?
No. Thanks.
That brings us to our executive sessions. We have, as I mentioned, several. I'm going to start reading the script. The city council will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.661H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and ORS 192.661E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff are allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room and we will end the public broadcast. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made nor final action taken in executive session. The executive session is anticipated to last 45 minutes. At the end of the executive session, the city council meeting will be adjourned and no action will be taken. We will now discontinue the live feed and recording.